It's in every single county. It's in our cities, but it's also in our wealthier suburbs. It's in our small towns. There's no place where you can hide from it. Ohio Attorney General Mike DeWine provided these remarks in a 60 Minutes episode that aired just a few weeks ago. What was the it he was referring to? Heroin. Once considered just a city drug, heroin use has infiltrated every strata of society. Because of heroin, Mike DeWine says that we are currently experiencing the worst drug epidemic he's seen in his entire lifetime. Today I'm first going to explain what heroin is and the harmful effects it has on the body. I will then examine its use and the recent rise in its prevalence. Lastly, I will explain why I believe the government should increase and mandate the availability of a medication called naloxone, and also argue for the funding of a heroin vaccination. So what is heroin? According to the National Institute on Drug Abuse, heroin is a highly addictive opioid drug processed from morphine. Opioids are drugs or medications that bind to opioid receptor sites in the brain to block the brain's messages of pain. SAMHSA, the Substance and Mental Health Services Administration, says that heroin can be smoked, snorted, or injected into the bloodstream, and all three methods of delivery are extremely dangerous. Heroin users report feeling a rush or state of euphoria after use, and this is followed by a stage of drowsiness and lack of proper mental function. Continued use of heroin can also lead to increased tolerance of the drug, which means that more of the drug is needed to achieve the same high, which oftentimes leads to dependence on the drug. In fact, according to the National Institute on Drug Abuse, 23% of people who use heroin become dependent on it. If someone with a heroin dependence abruptly stops using the drug, they may experience one or more of the following symptoms in as quickly as just a few hours. These symptoms include muscle and bone pain, insomnia, vomiting, cold flashes, and goosebumps. Studies have also shown that heroin use deteriorates the brain's white matter, which impacts one's behavior and decision-making abilities. Now that we understand the harmful effects heroin has on the body, I'm now going to examine its current use. According to the Foundation for a Drug-Free World, there are approximately 9.5 million users of heroin worldwide. According to the Office of National Drug Control Policy, there are 1.5 million chronic users of heroin in the United States, which refers to someone who uses heroin 4 or more times per month. Heroin use has also skyrocketed in recent years. SAMHSA reports that initiations, which refer to someone using heroin for the first time, have increased 80% among United States teenagers since 2002. The Center for Disease Control, or the CDC, reports that the death rate due to heroin overdoses has quadrupled since 2002, and there are nearly 3,000 deaths yearly due to heroin overdoses. Now that we have an understanding of heroin's infiltration and shocking death rates, I'm now going to discuss the types of people this epidemic is affecting. In 2013, a 31-year-old Corey Monteith, star of television series Glee, died after overdosing on heroin. People were shocked to hear that this had happened to a white, wealthy man entering the prime of his life. He was the exact opposite of your typical heroin user, right? Not at all, actually. Now, while many people have a particular stereotype as to the types of people using heroin, now the typical user is more like Corey Monteith, says Caleb Green, a researcher at the University of Washington specializing in drug abuse. A study done by Theodore Cicero, a professor at the Washington University in St. Louis, concluded that 90% of heroin users are white with a mean age of 23. We now know that the new typical users are white, suburban men and women and young adults. So how exactly did heroin make the transition from cities to suburbia, and why are so many young adults turning to the drug? From 1999 to 2011, there was a 300% increase in painkiller prescription sales, according to the CDC. Is it a coincidence that there has been this rise in painkiller prescription sales simultaneously with the increase in prevalence of heroin? Not at all. Tyler Campbell was a Division I football player who became hooked on painkillers prescribed to him after his shoulder surgery. He then started using heroin and died of an overdose. Robbie Brandt was a young adult training with the National Guard who became addicted to pain pills prescribed to him after having his wisdom teeth pulled. He then started using heroin and died of an overdose. And these people are not alone. According to the CDC, someone who is addicted to a painkiller drug is 40 times more likely to become addicted to heroin than someone who is not. Many young people get hooked on pain pills such as Oxycontin or Vicodin and make a very simple transition to heroin because it's cheaper, more easily accessible, and offers them a very similar high because these drugs are all under the same category as opioids. In order to combat this recent spike of heroin usage, I have two suggestions. First, I will give a policy suggestion that will help decrease the death rate among those who choose to use heroin. And then I will argue for the funding of a heroin vaccination that has the potential to stop many people from using heroin in the first place. There is a drug called naloxone that, according to SAMHSA, displaces opioids from receptor sites in the brain and essentially reverses the effects of heroin or other opioid drugs. It is an FDA-approved drug and has been used by the emergency medical services for more than 40 years. However, because training is necessary in order to administer naloxone, it has not widely been used outside of the emergency medical services. However, the FDA has recently approved of a new product called Evzio that is an automated naloxone injector and does not require training prior to its use, according to their website, evzio.com. As I said earlier, the mean age of a heroin user is 23, which means that a great majority of these users are high school and college students. Due to this, the government should require readily accessible Evzio in college and high school campuses nationwide in case of emergency. Just as automated external defibrillators are required at schools and health clubs nationwide, according to the Sudden Cardiac Arrest Foundation. Teachers should also be taught to look for signs of heroin or opioid overdoses, and these signs include slowed down heartbeats, fingernails turning blue or purple, or extremely small pupils, according to SAMHSA. However, this will only help save the lives of those who choose to use heroin. What about preventing it in the first place? Chemist Kim Janda is a researcher who has created a heroin vaccination. While there have been no human trials to date, there is evidence to suggest the efficacy of this drug. Dr. George Koob, who worked with Dr. Janda in creating the drug, says they have tested the vaccine on lab rats. He said that the rats on the vaccine could be given 10 times the dose of heroin that a normal rat could handle, and they looked at you as if nothing had happened. Preclinical testing also showed that the vaccine prevented relapse among the addicted rats. So why hasn't this vaccine been tested yet on humans? Dr. Janda states it pretty clearly. No pharmaceutical company is going to fund trials for heroin. But why not? According to an article on Time.com, Dr. Janda receives an email almost weekly from a worried parent asking if their addicted child can participate in clinical trials for this drug. With the clear increase in the prevalence of heroin usage in our country, the government needs to do everything in its power to try to find a solution. If there are people willing to participate, and there's evidence to suggest the drug will work, there's no reason that the government should not step in to fund this cause. In summary, the heroin epidemic is real. Heroin is sweeping through the nation with deadly results. More people are using, overdosing, and dying of heroin every single year. Tracy Morrison, who has 2 daughters currently recovering from their own heroin addictions, said it best. We don't throw diabetics who sit on the couch eating in prison. We don't belittle them, and there's not a big stigma. We don't do that to people who chain smoke and develop lung cancer. It's a chronic, relapsing brain disease. Period, end of story, and we need to accept it. It's time the government and our country accepts that that addictions need to be dealt with as a disease and moves towards helping those who use and are addicted to heroin by requiring the presence of naloxone on campuses nationwide and also increasing the funding of a heroin vaccination. Thank you.